You know, I just love playing the Pokemon card game. I forget about all the responsibilities I have to do. Like, is there anything I have to do? Shit. Uh, um, um, uh, shit. The Nintendo 3DS is a handheld game console produced by Nintendo. The console was announced March 2010 and unveiled at E3 2010 as the successor to the Nintendo DS. It features backwards compatibility, history, intro, just go, now, start.
The 3DS is shockingly not Nintendo's first attempt at 3D at all. Being the wacky company that they are, Nintendo has attempted 3D many times since they've started making games. The first ever home console, the Famicom, had an add-on released in 1987 called the Famicom 3D System. The 3D System was a headset that plugged into the system to display stereoscopic images for select titles. However, considering how this is the length of the Wikipedia page, it's pretty clear that this thing flopped hard. Look, it even says so right here! The only notable games that worked with the add-on was Famicom Grand Prix 2, which is pretty much a Mario Kart predecessor as it has Mario and Luigi driving cars, and Rad Racer, which still has its 3D functionality in the American version of the game, this time using the standard red and blue glasses. Next up, Nintendo released a console, that's for sure. The Virtual Boy is Nintendo's first international attempt at 3D, and dear god I wish it wasn't. Yes, I know, so original. The Nintendo critic is shitting on the Virtual Boy, what's new? But come on! This thing was made to be as cheap as possible as a way to get something Nintendo related on store shelves after the Nintendo 64 got delayed. It's a pair of goggles on a stand with terrible graphics and equally terrible games. I'm not the first to say this hot take, but the Virtual Boy, and sit down for this one, sit down, is not very good.
Wow.
And finally, for a little history lesson, the GameCube was also supposed to have stereoscopic 3D. Early planning for Luigi's Mansion features a 3D option that was scrapped due to 3D TVs being very pricey, not very consumer friendly. However, a decade later, with the success of Avatar, 3D was the biggest fad in media again, giving Nintendo the perfect opportunity to strike with 3D technology once more. The 3DS was initially unveiled at E3 2010 to high praise by reviewers and consumers alike. The system was available to demo on the show floor, where it was praised for being comfortable and had the graphical quality on the same level as the Xbox 360. Also, side tangent real quick, when I was doing my research about this topic, I came across this article by Game Rant about the 3DS at E3 2010, and just listen to this paragraph that the reviewer desperately felt the need to put in. It was the most insane gaming journalism I've ever read before.
As I waited in line to score some FaceTime with the 3DS, a very attractive, professional blonde woman came over with one strapped to her belt by a long white tether. I overlooked the sexual jokes I could have made and watched as she let the guy in front of me play with it for a couple of minutes.
God, don't we just love gaming journalists and how fantastic they are. Back on track. Some of the biggest 3DS titles for the first year were also unveiled at E3, like Kid Icarus Uprising, Mario Kart 7, and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. The console was even planning to get some big third-party support, with massive franchises like Kingdom Hearts, Metal Gear Solid, and Resident Evil making their way onto the platform. All of this hype led people to think that this would be the greatest handheld system ever released. Oh. The 3DS is infamous for having one of the worst console launches of any Nintendo handheld, one of the worst system launches in general. The system launched for $250 on March 27, 2011 in North America with very lackluster software. Easily the most impressive game on launch was Pilotwings Resort. Pilotwings Resort is a follow-up to the SNES launch title, Pilotwings, and the N64 launch title, Pilotwings 64. While being a good game that gives you something to play on day one, it is a game that doesn't excite general audiences enough to be a flagship title. The other games in the franchise did so well because they launched with must-play games that defied their generations. Pilotwings launched with Super Mario World, one of the greatest 2D platformers of all time. Pilotwings 64 launched with Super Mario 64, arguably one of the greatest and most important video games ever released. Pilotwings has always been a good franchise, but worked best as a complementary title to go along with another big hitter, not being the big hitter itself. Nintendo's other first-party titles include Steel Diver, a slow submarine simulation game that got middling reviews, and Nintendogs Plus Cats, a sequel to the DS game many people already played to death half a decade ago. The third-party support was also terrible. Ubisoft was the biggest supporter, launching 4 games that day that received middling to poor reviews, with Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon of all things scoring well, and very watered-down versions of The Sims 3, Madden Football, Street Fighter, Super Monkey Ball, and Ridge Racer that all failed to capture many consumers during that first week of sales. The 3DS was burning money, and changes had to be made quick. So, with heavy hearts, Nintendo went to Ubisoft and told them, hey, no more Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D. Dang it. In August of 2011, former President Satoru Iwata released a statement apologizing for the lackluster first few months and announced that the console would be going from $250 to $170 on August 12th. People who bought the console before the price cut were rewarded by getting 20 free NES and Game Boy Advance games. All the NES games made it to the Virtual Console eventually, but the Game Boy Advance games were exclusive to the Ambassador program. When asked why Nintendo never brought GBA games to the Virtual Console, Nintendo reported how they couldn't run GBA games on the 3DS. But what? Along with the price cut, 2 of the biggest games were mere months away from launching: Super Mario 3D Land and Mario Kart 7. These games are some of the best games released on the platform from the most popular and casual-friendly franchises. Super Mario 3D Land, while being the weakest 3D Mario in my opinion, is still a fantastic game. The game features some great, fairly expansive levels for being on a handheld with plenty of collectibles and extras to find. While it can feel a little generic at times, it's still a very fun game, worth being a mainstay on the console. Mario Kart 7 is a very similar story. Not the greatest Mario Kart, but still pretty good, and made some very impactful changes to the Mario Kart franchise, like underwater driving, gliding, and car customization. These 3 factors are what kicked off the 3DS's initial success. It helps that Ocarina of Time 3D, a remake of the highest rated game of all time, launched a month before the price cut, allowing a whole new generation to experience the game in the best version released. While a rocky start, the 3DS was picking up steam and showed no signs of stopping. 2012 was a very standard year for the 3DS. The biggest game was easily Kid Icarus Uprising. Created by Super Smash Bros. Director Masahiro Sakurai, the game revived and reinvented the long-dormant Kid Icarus franchise as a third-person shooter. While having a funky control style, holding the console with one hand using the circle pad, and using the other hand exclusively on the touchscreen, it did great in reviews and sold over 1 million copies, the highest the Kid Icarus franchise has ever sold before. However, selling 13 times as many copies is New Super Mario Bros. 2. The New Super Mario Bros. Franchise are all very generic 2D Mario platformers, but are all still good games, just nothing special. The game's gimmick is trying to go for 1 million coins. It's not required, but it's the only thing of note with this game. The game also brought back the Tanuki suit from Super Mario Bros. 3, and just like 3D Land. It's a fun power-up and a great return, but fails to give this game more of an identity, which is what New Soup 2 is lacking in heavily. Other notable games include Mario Tennis Open and Paper Mario Sticker Star, both the downfalls of the respective series, Resident Evil Revelations, which is infamous for misspelling its own name on the game's box, and Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure, a very underrated rhythm game by Sega. But the biggest release was a brand new console revision. How fun! I wonder how many of these console revisions we're gonna get. I mean, like, the GBA had 2, the original Game Boy had 2 as well, and the DS had 3. We'll probably see like 2 smaller changes, nothing big. I mean, the 3DS is already pretty good as it is. Like, how much could you like innovate on this, you know? Certainly not a new console almost every year, that would be ridiculous. The 3DS is kind of awful. There's something about this console I really hate. For starters, I'm not a big fan of big handhelds. I think the 3DS is a perfect size. It molds so perfectly in my hands, the buttons feel comfy and clicky and responsive, and the screens aren't the best, but they're far from the worst thing in the world. The 3DS XL is, as the name suggests, really big. To many, that's not an issue. To me, it is. But oh well, that's not the only reason I dislike the console. I hate how flimsy it is. It has such a cheap feel to it that makes me feel like I could snap it in half. I hate the screens, and I hate how washed out and just straight up bad they look. I don't care for the buttons, they're fine, but they're nothing more than fine. And lastly, I hate how it looks. It looks fake and just overall really cheap. For how the system was advertised to be the Pro option, it feels way worse than the standard model and is easily my least favorite in the 3DS line. 2013 is by far the biggest year for the 3DS. To start, we have another console revision, the 2DS. By far the most interesting console in the 3DS line, the 2DS ditches the clamshell design for a flat, tablet-esque design designed for younger players. Despite how weird it looks, the 2DS is one of my favorites as it's really comfortable and feels really good to play games on. For only $130 at launch, discounted to $80 in May of 2016, the 2DS is a no-brainer if you only care about playing a select few games. And what a time to release an entry-level console, as 2013 is home to some of the system's greatest games. Going in release order, Fire Emblem Awakening was a last-ditch effort to save the Fire Emblem series as it was starting to severely underperform, and it worked. It was the highest rated game in the series, and sold the most the series has ever seen until 2019's Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Switch. For being such an important game to the series, I don't really have much else to say. I never really got into Fire Emblem and thus never played this game. I mean, what can I say? I'm a Smash Bros. Fan. I have to hate this franchise. Smash Bros. Is all Fire Emblem, joke, laugh. March saw the release of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, a solid take on the Luigi's Mansion formula, but not my preferred gameplay style, and definitely the weakest of the three. I much prefer the singular big mansion of the first game compared to the more level-based second game. It's really cool to see the dream of a 3D Luigi's Mansion come to fruition, however. Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, released in May as a port of the Wii game without motion controls, arguably making it the best way to play that game. And in August, Mario & Luigi Dream Team released. The only memory I have of this game is I owned it for like a month. I know I did. And then I lost it, and I don't know where the hell it vanished to. That game is lost to the sands of time. Ace Attorney Dual Destiny is also released on the eShop this year, and it's an Ace Attorney game, alright. Look, it's an Ace Attorney game, that means it's good, but it's by far the weakest mainline game with some very high highs, but some very low lows. Dual Destiny also contains my least favorite soundtrack in the whole series, as well as the 3D models in the games just looking. Spoilers, but they look way better in the next 3DS game, Spirit of Justice. And that's all for the smaller 2013 releases. We still need to cover the 3 highest selling and highest rated 3DS games that all released this year: Animal Crossing New Leaf, Pokemon X and Y, and The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Released in June, Animal Crossing New Leaf was a much needed update on the Animal Crossing formula while keeping the game rooted in its traditions. The previous games were all very successful, especially the DS entry Wild World, but all got pretty stale after a while. They had you buying a house, paying off debt to upgrade your house so you could pay off more debt, all while finding furniture and helping villagers. It gets pretty boring and repetitive after about a week. New Leaf fixes that by having you be the mayor of your town, along with many new shops and additions to give the game more content. You have much greater control of your town, like being able to start public projects or adding special quirks to your town, like having shops open or close earlier or later. It also added Tortimer's Island, a sub-area that allows you to collect unique bugs and fruit. New Leaf is easily the best and most robust Animal Crossing game, even outshining New Horizons, as most of the game's updated content came from this game. However, Animal Crossing has never been a franchise I cared too much about. I've put decent time into New Leaf, but I don't really care to keep up with it like many others. However, I do keep up with the Pokemon franchise. I know, shocker. Pokemon X and Y are the first 3D games, the start of the downfall, as some may say. For being the biggest media franchise, ever, the mainline games took a while to get to the 3DS. Spin-offs were coming out within the first year, but the mainline games were stuck on the DS, with Black and White 2 coming out in 2012. This changed with the release in X and Y in, 2013, the year I've been talking about. I really enjoy X and Y, in spite of some major flaws. This game fails on so many fronts. The story is god-awful and underbaked. There's so many plot beats that are just missing, especially with Team Flare. Lysander just kind of snaps out of nowhere and plots to rid the world of all life for little to no reason without thinking of the many issues that come with that plan. The rivals are the worst the Pokemon franchise has ever seen, no doubt about that. With there being 4 of them, none of them have proper character development or really any traits, as they kinda just get randomly crammed into parts of the story, reminding you that they even exist. The only memorable one is Serena, solely for her amazing depiction in the anime and having a pretty good card in the TCG. Also, the game is piss easy. Easy like piss. The last gym only has 3 Pokemon, with all the Elite Four members having only 4 Pokemon each. The game also introduced the EXP share to cut down on grinding, which is the most controversial addition that really shouldn't be controversial. The EXP is a must share for Pokemon-like games. When you're constantly adding and swapping new team members, grinding for hours to get them up to the rest of the team is boring and bad game design. Letting them power up while you continue the story is a godsend and makes going back to older games near impossible. The only reason it gets so much flack is because the introduction game doesn't use it well by having the game be so easy without it, so it's a cakewalk with it. But that's not the EXP share's fault. It's up to the game design to be balanced around the EXP share, something that Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet do very well. Sorry, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, I enjoy Pokemon X and Y a lot though. Something about the design, the look, the quirks of the game makes me love it so much. And while it has its issues, I can look past them because I just have fun while playing the game. And to end 2013 came the release of The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Acting as a spiritual successor to the Super Nintendo classic, A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds is a top-down 2D Zelda game with the main gimmick of being able to stick to the walls to enter cracks between low roll and high roll. Other than that, it's very standard 2D Zelda, but it's fantastic. You're allowed to tackle any dungeon in whatever order you want to, there's tons of collectibles and side quests to find and complete, and you get to rent out items instead of just finding them within the dungeon. While I may not have too much to say, that does not mean that this is a bad or unremarkable game in the slightest. In fact, it's one of my favorite Zelda games, one of my favorite games on this platform. I highly recommend you give this one a try. After the massive year that was 2013, 2014 is a lot less impactful while still being great for the system. 2014 saw the release of my 3 personal favorite 3DS games, Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, and Tomodachi Life. In Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, take all the gameplay additions like the EXP share, Mega Evolutions, and 3D movement, and put it into one of the greatest Pokemon stories with amazing characters, actually difficult battles at times, and brand new gameplay mechanics like flying on Mega Latios or Latias, and the Dex Nav, along with the new post-game, the Delta episode. This is also when I realized I forgot to talk about Mega Evolution when I went on my massive rant about X and Y, which is like that whole game's like main gimmick. It's cool. I like. Omega Ruby was my first ever Pokemon game, which makes it the best Pokemon game, and you're wrong and I'm right, and this is the greatest game ever, and shut up. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, gross title aside, was such a great and amazing port of Smash Bros. To a system that was on the same power scale as the GameCube. Compared to its Wii U counterpart, Smash for 3DS was a little slower and definitely harder to play at a higher level, but made up for it by having amazing game modes and better stages. When Smash 4 was the main Smash games, I found myself coming back to the 3DS version compared to the Wii U game as I was just having more fun with it. Now I say was because with Ultimate on the Switch, there's zero reason to ever go back to Smash for 3DS, with Ultimate giving you, well, the ultimate Smash experience. But when this game was new, it was by far my favorite Smash game. And Tomodachi Life is the 3DS game I've easily put the most time into, and I'm disappointed by saying that sentence. All these fantastic, long, beautiful stories with engaging gameplay. Me Hotel. The sequel to the Japan-only Tomodachi collection, Tomodachi Life has you put your Miis onto an island, and you watch them live life. They'll ask you for clothes, food, new apartments, and you can give them whatever you want. They have problems, they make friends, fall in love, they play games with you, and that's really the extent of the gameplay. The charm of the game comes from watching your friends, celebrities, video game characters, and eldritch horrors interact. It's very simple, but one that I come back to and make a new island almost every year. It's also a very nostalgic game for me. I remember watching the YouTubers Swimmingbird and Solely Plays play it, and it made me want the game so bad. I played that demo over and over and over again, which is very funny because it's only like the first 10 minutes of gameplay. And finally saved up enough money to buy it off the eShop, where I showed it to my friends and then they bought the game too. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and it's one of the reasons I constantly go back to my 3DS. Some other notable games include like Kirby's Triple Deluxe, Mario Golf World Tour, Pets Beach, Pets Countryside, Pop Tropica Forgotten Islands, and Ultimate NES Remix, all the best games that released this year. 2015 is where we start to see the downfall of the 3DS. Starting with positives, we have a new console revision, the new 3DS XL. This new system takes a lot of complaints of the original 3DS and fixes them. A second circle pad for compatible games, more powerful internals to run bigger games, eye tracking 3D, and a ZL and ZR button, while keeping the same size of the 3DS XL and the better battery life. The console is undeniably the best 3DS revision, as it's everything you could have ever asked for in a 3DS. However, what if you have small little hands like me, and prefer a smaller console, like me? Well, you could get the regular new 3DS, in Japan only, or a Mario-themed console for Black Friday. That was it. Nintendo never released a regular-sized new 3DS in America, only the XL. Which is a shame, but not too bad all things considered, as the XL is still a fantastic console. Released alongside the new 3DS is a remake of my favorite game of all time, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D. While still being a fantastic game with some of the greatest stories and gameplay loops I've ever experienced in any game ever, Majora's Mask 3D is nowhere near as good as the N64 original. Director Eiji Aonuma has stated multiple times for his disdain for the rushed N64 version, with them having to rush the game to meet the year deadline Shigeru Miyamoto gave the team. This caused a lot of stress and crunch time on the team, especially on Aonuma. So when a Majora's Mask remake was talked about after they finished the Ocarina remake, Aonuma was hesitant. When work started on the MM remake, they overcorrected some issues with the first game. Deku Link's spin doesn't produce speed anymore, Goron Link's roll is wonky and just doesn't work as well as the N64 version, and Zora Link's swimming especially has been butchered as it's really slow compared to the very fast swimming of the original game. All the bosses are now simplified with easy to hit weak points, and some of the side quests are mixed around to give unfitting items now. Don't get me wrong, this is still a good game and still a good remake of my favorite game. It's just that the N64 game is a lot better in almost all regards. And that's really it for 2015. Looking at the list of released games, everything else is pretty bad, including Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, Chibi Robo Ziplash, Happy Home Designer, Triforce Heroes, and Garfield Kart, the world-renowned Garfield Kart. This is a trend that would continue on for the rest of the 3DS's life. 2016 saw the release of Pokemon Sun and Moon, Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, and Kirby Planet Robobot, all pretty good games, nothing fantastic, but good. But it also saw the release of Metroid Prime Federation Force, Mario Maker for 3DS, and Mario & Luigi Paper Jam. 2017 saw the weirdest and worst console revision release, the new 2DS, a budget new 3DS that had no place in Nintendo's lineup, as it was too expensive for casuals and too late for hardcore fans, as this was the year that the Switch came out. Along with abysmal games like Mario Party The Top 100, Hey Pikmin, and Mario Sports Superstars. At least Miitopia was fantastic. WarioWare Gold and Luigi's Mansion came out in 2018, and were both good, but this was also a year after the Switch came out. Why weren't they on the Switch, especially Luigi's Mansion? In 2019, the last year of the 3DS ended on such a sad whimper, with 5 games releasing throughout the whole year, one of them killing the studio that made it, Alpha Dream. Nintendo's last game for the platform was Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, a poor port of the Wii classic that had people asking one question: why wasn't it on the Switch? The 3DS is one of my favorite consoles of all time. I've held off making this video for a while because I wanted to make it right. I didn't want to half-ass this video. This system is too important for me to just make a quick little video about it. I needed to go in depth, go year by year. Despite how poor the system ended, constantly being compared to the Switch during its last 3 years, I still think it's amazing. Out of all previous Nintendo consoles, this is the one I find myself going back to constantly. Maybe the Wii has that title, but this is definitely a close second. This console has some of my favorite games of all time, and has such a massive library, spanning from the sizable Virtual Console to the DS Treasure Trove to the amazing 3DS exclusives. I love this console and find it to be one of Nintendo's best. Plus, you can play every Ace Attorney game on it. The trilogy released on the eShop, then Apollo Justice released on the eShop, which was way too expensive. It was really weird how they remade just Apollo Justice, but you could already play that game, but whatever, that's fine. Then the investigation games are playable with backwards compatibility. Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice were 3DS exclusive for a long time. And the Great Ace Attorney has a fan translation that aren't as good as the official Capcom translations, but are still pretty okay. Of course, this is the greatest console of all time. It has all of Peak on it. Hey, so this was filmed before the Apollo Justice trilogy and the Ace Attorney collection were announced, and that now makes the Switch the definitive way to play Ace Attorney, because now you can play all the games with official translations. This is what happens when you wait way too long to make a video.